so this is the parts breakdown for the counter shaft. This is the counter shaft here. So you want to place the roller bearing on first in the seat right here, next to this gear, which corresponds to this smaller gear here, which is an integral part of the counter shaft. Then, over top of that, you'll place this gear, which will ride on the roller bearing right here. Next, you'll place the 3-piece synchronizer assembly right here onto the gear. Then the slider we'll place over in this direction with this ledge mounted towards this way. I don't know which way that is. Then the hub gets pressed on and the snap ring retaining it needs to get installed. Install the detents, springs, and balls, and then place the synchronizer onto the gear here, which corresponds to this, the largest gear in the gear train. Then put the roller bearing on the shaft, which corresponds to this location right here. Slide the gear and this 3-piece synchronizer assembly on. Then install this piece, which engages this gear using a press. This is press fit. On the bench, install upside down the slider with its ledge facing this way. Well, yep, you can see there's that ledge. Facing this way with this gear flipped up so that we're looking down on the inside of it. We're looking down this way. Then install the spring, the 2 detents, and finally the synchronizing ring over top of it. Hold this entire assembly together. Install it with the roller bearing on and this bearing race right here onto this. Before you do that, don't forget to install this little ball. And I showed you all this part. I showed you from here up. It was just these that got deleted. And then the snap ring that retains this bearing race, pictured right here. And then install the bearing and its lock ring right here. I don't honestly remember there being a snap ring. I thought it was a... Yeah, I thought it was just this guy, and then it could ride back and forth. But maybe the snap ring can sit against this. I don't remember, but I think there is. I think there's a snap ring that retains this bearing race. That should give you enough information to be able to stack the first part of the counter shaft, these 2 gears, and these 2 hubs. All right, I think I'm on to something here. So the way that we're going to stack this, and I believe that this is direct drive, I think so this is the counter shaft. We've already put this engagement ball in. We have this slider, and as you can see, there's these sort of dimpled teeth down here which engage with these down here, which are pressed onto the counter shaft. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to align these 2, the dented teeth, with this, which I don't think matters because this is going to spin independently of this. But you'll notice that it only goes down that far onto here. It doesn't index any further, which is really strange to me. I would have thought it would have gone further down. But it doesn't go any further either way. And in the last video, where I took it apart, I have it like this. Well, not exactly in this position, but I have it rattling around like that. And then this blocking ring is going to go in like so. And then, if I'm not mistaken, these going to go in with their little dimples facing up. Well, okay. Something like that. And this is a finicky job. And you can see you got to rest it on top of that brass blocking ring. And then this is orientated with these little tangs facing up. And then these, I think I'm actually going to flip this around and face it like this. So that way, the end of this blocking ring will be like that. And it'll just make it a little easier to put together, if I'm not mistaken. Like that. And then I will position the retaining spring like this, with again those little ears facing up. All right, I'll show it to you assembled, and then I'll go ahead and pop this slider on. Yeah, and that, or the hub rather, and this hub will sit in here, and it has slots, the 2 wide over here, and then there are 3 teeth wide on either end. So yeah, we'll go ahead and pop that in once everything's assembled. Okay, so as best as I can tell, this is how this is supposed to be assembled. You have the slider with the larger lip and the flat teeth facing toward the front of the transmission, or what I think is, well, it's up here. This is the bearing that we pressed off. You have these little ears on top, and then you have these 2 teeth, or these 2 ends of this retaining ring, pressing against the ends of this with these little divots facing upward. And then again, I face this one to the 2 holes in this main, I don't know, drive thing. I don't know what it's called. These 2 are indexed around the blocking ring, and then this end is lined up with this, just for me to keep everything consistent. Do not forget your little ball here. The next step will be to clean and lubricate this bearing race, which slides in like this, and then you'll notice that come on, this guy has a hole, and that this hole, or that this indentation right here, lines up with this ball. So if you have it off to the side, it hits against that, and you turn it, and it drops into place. If you don't have that, then you run the risk of this guy spinning on the shaft, and it'll ruin your shaft, and it'll ruin this race. So you definitely want to make sure that that's in place. I'm going to go ahead and wipe any of the excess kerosene that I had on there off with a rag. Make sure that your rag's clean. This one's not terribly clean. Speaking of which, I need to go to the dentist, get my teeth cleaned. Oh, yep, and you can see right there, I just moved it. Be careful, you don't move it. This thing is very fiddly. So I'll show you this once everything's assembled and pop it into place. Okay, so I want to show you what all I've done. I cleaned this off with brake clean and then blew it off with some feather duster. I need to go start that air compressor so I can just use shop air instead of wasting my feather duster. But I lubed up this surface, and you can see there are oil channels for letting oil in or out. I'm not sure which. And then I lubed the inside surface for the bearing race. I lubed this guy up. As you can see, there's a little bit of red on it by just kind of spinning it above all the schmoo in the bottom there. And now what I'm going to do is go ahead and, oh, I should lube that up too. There we go. I love mowing. It's a good feeling. And then that slides together like that. And now I'll go ahead and make sure that my inner race here is lined up with that little ball, and we can go ahead and put everything together. All right, never mind. So you got to assemble this synchronizer, or these are the detents rather that hold the synchro in place, or the slider in place. You got to assemble this on the bench. So what I did was I popped the slider on first. As you can see, I've indexed, God, I wasn't filming, hand, so index 1, 2, 3 with this end here, and with this hole, and then the 2 and the 2, and then this guy, the other 2, just goes on the other side. Then I popped the spring in, and then I popped this detent in place, and then I pulled this slider back up like that. See, and I pulled it up until it kind of popped into place up there. This is a two-handed ordeal, and then I used my pick to go underneath through this hole to push the spring inward, so that way I could fit this detent in place. Once this had settled down over on this end, I used my pick to finish putting it in right here. Kind of an ordeal. Now that it's done, we can go ahead and pop the blocking ring in. Make sure that everything is going to fit. Just like that. Yes. And then I'm going to use 2 hands to pick this up and set it on here. So of course, the new phone didn't get all the 2 videos that I took yesterday of stacking these 2 gears on here. So what you're going to want to do is take this gear, clean it and lube it up, put the bearing in the middle of it, and drop it on. Then you'll go ahead and put the blocking ring, and it's one of these 3-part blocking rings. There are 2 identical 3-part blocking rings that comprise 2 brass and 1 silver piece, or 2 bronze and 1 steel. That's really what it is. They're identical, and they go here and here. Once you have that stacked on, I believe that, yes, you press the slider on. And again, sorry I didn't capture this. And there's an orientation. I think, yeah, the inner divot of the slider that kind of looks like that, has that profile in a cross section, goes down towards this gear, if I'm not mistaken. Press that on, put the 3 shift detents in, and what I did was I used my 2 fingers on this hand to hold in the little balls while I put in the 3rd ball from the backside with my pinky finger, and then I slid the slider over those detents and balls. Like you can see in part 2, I slid it over like that to hold them in. It's not the greatest design, whatever, because those balls pass through that little T-shaped kind of dog housing or whatever it's called. Then go ahead and clean the roller bearing for this guy, put the synchronizing assembly in, stack the gear on top, and then underneath of this there's a snap ring, a thick snap ring underneath of this gear. You want to put that snap ring on and put this gear in place. At least I think it's underneath of this guy. Yeah. And then you can stack all of this. Sorry, you might have to watch how it got taken apart in part 2, like I did, because I'm not unstacking this. Well, you know, I might later, but I don't think I'll need to, unless I can't figure out where that snap ring goes. So, oh, I guess we're in gear now. Oh, fuck. Well, yep, and just like that, she is assembled. All right, so continuing on this project, Once you've made sure that there is clearance here, there's no snap ring that's supposed to go in this groove that I configure. I made sure to clean this surface off with a towel and clean the snap ring groove. And then I made sure to clean this bearing off. It's a sealed bearing. Now, note the orientation. The old one came off like this. And if you need proof that the old one came off in that manner, cows are mooing. Take a look at the old bearing. See how I damaged it? That was because it was facing front. It was facing the front and the bell housing the transmission, where I was trying to beat a snap ring apart. Best as I can figure, this snap ring here sits down in this groove on the rear, where a bearing. Oh, okay, awesome. Where a bearing sits. And it retains one of these bearings on its end. So we'll go ahead and put that one in once we figure out which bearing is supposed to sit on there. But for now, we're going to go ahead and press this sealed unit bearing onto the end of the counter shaft, and then we're going to retain it using the snap ring. I think these two are different size and different thickness. Maybe this one's just bent from me bunging it up. This one looks a little bit thicker and wider, so keep your snap rings organized and try to press this sucker on straight. As you can see, it's kind of cockeyed. So go ahead and just set her on there flat. Then we're going to go ahead and flip it upside down and press on the end of the shaft and press her up. So as you can see, I'm holding the counter shaft right here, and then I'm holding the gear up with my left hand. The bearing is sitting against the bed plates. Let me see if well, I guess I need a third arm or a second dick to film, but the bearing is on. And note that the, come on, focus on me, snap ring groove is exposed. So the bearing turns freely, this assembly turns freely. Make sure that all of your gears turn freely in neutral, that they lock up. Then I'm going to put this snap ring on. I'm going to put the other snap ring on. Yeah, this guy goes on this end, so we'll put it on first, and then we'll put the other snap ring on the other end, and I'll try and see if I have any tricks to show you there. The bearing that is associated with the rear of the counter shaft and with this inner bearing race and snap ring sits inside of the rear case of the transmission right here. This is down, this is up, this is where the shifter sits. Because it is pressed in from the top, how I removed this bearing, which is a light press fit, is by taking a propane or MAP gas torch and heating around the circumference of the aluminum housing and of the bearing. I didn't get it super hot because of the rubber that is present here. As you can see, it endured some heat damage, which is fine. I'm not planning on reusing that bearing. What I'm going to do now is take this bearing and put it in the freezer. This outer bearing race might present a little bit more of a challenge, although it looks like there are two cutouts, one on each side, that will allow me to get beneath it with that bearing press, bearing puller kit, and remove this inner bearing race. The new one, which is set right here on the bench, and which appears to be ambidextrous in its nature, will be heated with that torch, and then will be dropped onto the shaft. And if that doesn't work, we'll go ahead and press it on. I really fucking hate these. But as you can see, I got it off. You're gonna want to avoid doing that and cutting into your counter shaft. But I don't really think it matters. It's not that deep. And, well, I think there's plenty of meat left there. Besides, this isn't going to be transferring any power here. It's just going to be resting in a bearing race. So we'll go ahead and clean that up. You can see I used my angle grinder and just went fuck nuts and retard strong on it. I mean, you can't tell how thick this thing is when you're grinding it. So just be careful and go slow and don't do like I did. Do as I say, not as I do. Yeah, so grab that. And I'm probably gonna heat this guy up and drop it on. I might just set it right there and then heat around it like this. See if she drops on. And then it'll contract and shrink into place, so I'll let you know. All right, so this is the punch that I used, along with that propane torch right there, and I set this bearing race, inner bearing race, just to top this and made sure everything was square. And then I heated it, and I turned this slowly as I heated it, kind of like a rotisserie. Then I used a ball peen hammer right there to beat this down onto the boss or whatever it's called that it sits on. Then I went ahead and put this snap ring on. So this counter shaft should be fully assembled. Again, I'm going to want to make sure that it goes into all the gears and that everything rotates freely without any hard spots, without any notches, that everything goes into gear and locks up, that you don't have any missing parts, but instead that all the parts that you wanted to replace are sitting off the side. Okay, so now we're going to begin to stack the main shaft. I have it fixtured in the vise. This is where the front bearing sits. As you'll notice, there's this lip here that precludes any single piece bearing from slipping over this, which means that of all of the parts we have sitting here, the only one with another split bearing on it doesn't quite fit. It goes up here. I took these two bearings, and after cleaning them with brake clean and then spraying them out, I dipped them in the lube, and then I placed them on the shaft that I toweled off. I also lubed up the inside of this bearing race. So we're going to go ahead and a little bit of lube on the bottom here, and then go ahead and place it over top of those bearings. Make sure that it spins. This is the old blocking ring or synchronizer. This is the new blocking ring or synchronizer. Go ahead, take that, and dip it. And then we're going to place it atop the gear. Make sure that it's roughly level. Something that's good to do is to take these and get a chunk of granite that would be used for a gravestone or something similarly that's machined within about 1/1000th of an inch, and check it with a known good straight edge, and then set these on top of that to make sure that they're flat. But as you'll notice here, a different train of thought, there's 3 of these identical blocking rings, so it doesn't matter which one goes where. But again, you want to check to make sure that they match with each one. So that came from there. My inclination is that this hub goes this way onto this gear. Now, there's only one location that each of these hubs can go in, but there are 2 different directions. Just trying to see, I think this top bit's recessed maybe 0.100ths of an inch versus this one is flush with the top. If I'm I'm not mistaken, this is how it goes. But I'm going to watch the video that I made earlier and see. Well, it was a 50-50 shot. I tried it with this side up, with whatever gear this is. But apparently the side with the dot goes down. And the side without the dot faces third gear. So I'm going to clean it off, and then we're going to go ahead and press it onto the shaft. All right. Make sure that the bearing spins freely, and that when you apply pressure to the synchronizer, that it stops the gear. Make sure that the hub is pressed all the way down, and you'll know that it's pressed all the way down because your snap ring fits properly. The next thing that I'm going to do is clean this spacer. And put a little oil on it. Okay. There. Now I'm going to go ahead and clean the third gear, roller bearing, gear, and I'm going to grab the new third gear synchronizer, shell that right there, and then we will stack all of this together. The other thing that I need to do before I do that is install the shift detents and the slider. And I'm not quite sure which one it is, because it looks like these are both the same size. Rather unfortunate. Although, if they're the same size and they have the exact same pattern, then I don't figure it matters which one goes where. That's kind of funny. Okay, well, I guess I'll take a look at that then. Huh. Well, if they're the same, then it doesn't matter. So I used some of the assembly U, and I shoved it into the detents from the back, the shift dogs, and as you can see, it's retaining that spring. So what I'm going to do now is attempt to shove this detent assembly into place within the hub, and then I can put the slider over top of it, and then I can put third gear on. All right. Slider has been lubed, cleaned pretty well. You will want to take and align this middle notch with the detent, because it has a little notch inside of it right there that the ball will sit in. And this little lip faces up, no little lip on the bottom. And just as sort of a logic check, that makes sense, right? Because if that lip was to face down, it would interfere with the operation of this gear. Whereas when this lip faces up, it's not going to interfere with the operation of third gear, which is going to sit like this. Oh, come on, honey. Well, you get my point. Next, you will want to place the roller bearing, which you've cleaned and lubed, onto the shaft, followed by the 3-piece blocking ring assembly. The 3-piece blocking ring assembly has tabs in the outer outer silver piece rather, observed here, which index with holes in the hub, just so. There's only one way, or there are only 3 ways rather, that this blocking ring assembly can properly clock into the hub and slider. Next, clean the gear and install it with the teeth facing down, and with these 3 holes aligned with these 3 tangs on the middle piece of the blocking ring. Okay. We have 4 pieces now to install after the third gear has been installed onto the main shaft of the transmission. Around the back of the main shaft, as we have it positioned, you'll note that there's a hole or a recess that has been machined into the machine surface. That accepts this dowel, probably a 1/4 inch or 4 millimeters in diameter, something like that, 2, 3, 4, something like that. This gets put into the hole first, followed by this guy, which slides over it. The snap ring retains this spacing collet, and then this spacer is placed over top of the snap ring to protect the snap ring from wear from the next gear that rides above it. I will show you as we assemble this. All right, this spacing collet has been cleaned, lubricated. Some of the green assembly lubricant has been installed or placed into this hole or the machined recess, and the dowel has been forced into it. You'll notice maybe 1/8 of an inch of dowel exposed. Now, we can take the collet with that groove for its acceptance roughly aligned and slide it into place. What I believe to be aligned. Oh boy. How in the hell did it get stuck? Stop it. Okay. Like that. That spacing collet should seat and no interference should be encountered between it and the gear. Next, the snap ring will be installed. It's a 2-handed procedure, followed by the final spacing washer.